So what you're going to have today is you're going to have three speakers, myself, Vanessa Richards, Albert McLeod, and Allison Yearwood will finish us up. We've got about 20 minutes for introductions and presentations. We'll have a discussion together. I'm interested to know which of you artist practitioners have been investigating, exploring in a new and conscientious way, the way somatics have been working in your practice, or been reading about somatics. Any somatic practitioners out there? All right, good. I'm seeing a gang of you. Jacob, Allison, Maya, Robin. So I'm gonna invite us as the last part of our, almost the last part of our warm-up, to do a little somatics. I'm gonna invite everybody to roll your shoulders forward and up. Let them hang down loose. Imagine that your body has got this building block of bones holding up your head. We're gonna look over our left shoulder. I just want you to look up and look down. We're gonna actually scan the room that we're in, and we're gonna place ourselves where we are. To quote the naturalist, environmentalist John Burroughs, do not despise the hour or the place where you are. Every place is under the stars. Every place is the center of the universe. And we're gonna just get you comfortable here and remind yourself that you're safe. And especially sending this to our friends out in the Ukraine. Looking over the left, looking up, looking down. Full eye movement to the left and to the right from this position. And we're gonna look over our right shoulder, do the same thing. Looking up and down. Looking for doorways and exits. Remembering you have the opportunity to leave this conference. So you're here willingly. And if you can, turn around and really get a sense of what's behind you. What's behind you? Really looking up and down. And again, noticing the doors, the windows, the ways that you can leave. I'm going to do something I just feel inspired to do. I want you to take your hands, just put them at the back, the lower part of your neck. One of the places that the vagus nerve passes through. And if you ever feel like you're feeling kind of unsafe, you can touch yourself here. You can go to a wall and just lean. The wall is actually even more effective than the hands. If you're by yourself and you feel like you need somebody to have your back, you can remember that you have your back and the house where you stand has your back. So just lean in. Okay, friends, so that's how I want you to feel like you're well held today with us. So thank you for being here. And I have one last question. Camera off, please. And this is the premise of my talk that I want to discuss with us. Camera on if you feel like, as a community engaged artist, as a social practitioner, however it is you call yourself in this wondrous work that we do in facilitating change and transformation, how many of you feel like you are making a livable wage? Camera on. Great. Good, I saw a shoulder shrug. This is beautiful. Right on, people. Second page, 2 pages of it, nice. So that's about 50 of 120. So I want to speak to the other people. And I encourage you, and also you can leave your cameras on too. I love it because that makes me feel like I'm speaking to you and I can read your faces a little bit. I can read a Zoom room really quite a lot better when the cameras are on. So if you're comfortable with that, it does me a solid. Thank you. So what I want to share with you is that, so my name is Vanessa Richards and I am a social artist. Got a whole lot of birds outside of my window. If you hear very strange sounds, that's what it is. I'm a social artist committed to the civic imagination and how it gets unfurled in everyday life for everyday people. And our collective creativity is one of the integral components that I think brings us in right relationship with each other in the living earth. And that's the investigation and commitment I have in my work. And what I wish to cultivate with you are pathways, ones that lead us to honor and protect what is abiding and needs conserving and what needs transformation. And I want to do this with you with courage and cooperation and the radical imagination required for these times. What I learn about collaboration from being a musician and a performance artist inspires me to develop partnerships that elevate the art of community building, change making, and people power. And what I learn about and what I like to share with others when I'm facilitating with others often, what I learn about self-reliance from writing and reading of poetry motivates me to cultivate engagement practices that hone the individual and the civic imagination. What I learn about improvisation from music and performance, crafting, carnival arts, and teachings, it provokes me to value risk and rigor. What I learn about accessibility from convening compels me to hold dynamic differences in the spirit of hospitality that invites grace, deep listening, and belonging. I'm interested in building with you the tools that can be able to dismantle, restructure, and reimagine a world that cares for all. So I'm really interested in advancing. This is one of my working goals in my life and in my life's work, to advance imaginative thinking across disciplines and to bring more artists to more tables outside of the arts ecosystem. I think we need to be everywhere, not just for the contribution of our work, but for the quality of our thinking, for us to, and then this thinking that allows us to be adaptive and focused and expressive and collaborative, enthusiastic, visionary, and not financially poor. We don't have to be poor. That's my decolonizing stance. I want to kick poverty to the curb for everybody, not just for artists. According to the Canadian research firm Hill Strategies, the median individual income for Canada's artists is $24,300, or 44% less than all Canadian workers. Cultural workers, those that are working in and around and adjacent to and supportive of artists, or artists ourselves working in those ways, we make a bit more. And that's what I want to talk about. They're making $43,500. But cultural workers also have making less than other workers. I'm going to put these links for you in the chat afterwards if these numbers are used to at any point. So I'm interested in the space between star and starving, and that it needs to be filled with more of us. The space between star and starving needs to be filled with more working artists, because there's dignity there. And this is what I want to share with you, how I started to bust away from only receiving government grants that I had to compete for. We have to compete for grants, which, I understand the premise of that, but I think there's another way. And that's what I want to talk about. It isn't going to be everybody's way. And I'm kind of interested in this space before the complete dismantling of capitalism. But as we're in this betwixt and between this liminal space, I want to talk about how we can get paid, right? And not only be in competition for what is an exceptional economy. And so what I've been interested in and what I've been working towards and finding some great satisfaction and success was bringing my skills, my interests, and my tools by aligning my community arts, my social practice into new sectors who also need our perspectives and our healing skills and the imagination and the joy that our work brings. It took a minute, but I figured out how to do this work with values-aligned people in other sectors, and brought my practices and thinking to these places and started to earn a living that reflects not only my values, but my value. As my girl Raw Goddess says, artists can stay true, get paid, and do good. And she based this on the entrepreneurial roots of hip hop culture. There's a reason why hip hop talks about money a lot. Sometimes the roots of that revolutionary Black entrepreneur spirit gets lost in, videos of people just throwing around money. But really, the truth is that poverty is a colonial tool. poverty sucks. There was a book that really helped me understand, in particular, the economic framework that I was living in, and so was everybody I knew. Many of my friends are artists. Maybe many of you live in an arts community of many, many friends who are also underpaid. This book that really opened my thinking about the arts economy, patronage, philanthropy, government grants, and how ill-prepared most of us are for the work around the value of our work outside of the exceptional economy of the arts. It started when Glenn Alteen, who's the director of the Artist Front and artist-owned Front Gallery in Vancouver, he passed me this book, Why Are Artists Poor? The Exceptional Economy of the Arts, by the Dutch painter, artist Hans Abing. It's available at no cost, and I'm going to put it in the chat when I finish talking. And ironically, it's available at no cost from the Open Access Publishing. We have what the world needs right now. We have the resources to deliver aspects of the world we want to transform. We have the agency to do the work of social change on more than small change. For arts-based facilitators, I'm getting lots of value also from the book Adrienne Marie Brown just released called Holding Change. And I just want to say, if this conversation is old hat to you, speak to everybody else who isn't in this situation. If you are making a doable living, make sure you're continuing aligning yourself with other organizations that have real budgets, with people with our level of skill, expertise, capacity for change, capacity for influence. They're getting paid a lot more than us. Why? I'm saying put yourself at the table. If you're interested in something, if your art speaks to medicine, if it speaks to policy, to any of the subject areas that you're interested, go to those places where those people are, those meetings, those conferences. Start making your contributions. Invite yourself to be a part of their budget line when you say, this is how I think I could work with you. And start getting paid what they're getting paid, right? And then what we can do with our money as a sector, I mean, just think about how much money you already share and you make so little, right? So I just wanted to really encourage you that I think one of the most decolonial things we could do is get under the yoke of poverty and really start to think about, excuse me, that sounds patronizing. I don't mean we need to start thinking about it. I know we think about money a lot, but really giving ourselves the opportunity to find other values aligned sectors that also care about what you care about, and then finding the confidence and the hustle and the whatever it is you need, and the relationships, because this work happens at the speed of trust, the speed of relationships, to start getting yourself really, really, really taken care of so that you can do the work at hand and not be worrying about rent. That's my decolonial strategy, friends. Happy to talk about it in any other way, at any other time. My name is Vanessa Richards, and I would like to now pass you on to Albert McLeod.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you also, Maggie, for the smudge to begin us. Lots to think about, Vanessa. Great. I don't have any birds, but I have crows. It's minus 40. Not sure if this thing, I'm just going to go into my share screen, see if I can find my beloved PowerPoint. Oh, here it is. It's hiding. So again, I live in Winnipeg, which we know, okay. Just got to make sure the Facebook gods are helping us today. So I live in Winnipeg. I originally come from northern Manitoba, and been living among Ojibwe people for the last 40 years, learning about Ojibwe culture, language, traditions, spirituality, and philosophies. And that's sort of, as a Cree person being in Ojibwe territory, that is a traditional practice of adoption. Whether you go any part of North America or in South America, the tradition is to adopt a stranger and share willingly about your culture because it is strong. And as we know, Indigenous cultures have been around in North America for 20,000 or more years. So we've had a lot of time to figure out stuff. And so today I'll talk about some of the resurgence of Indigenous art, but also from a decolonizing lens. And so memes are kind of a popular way of communicating today virtually, whether you're on TikTok or Facebook or, and I pulled this one up because this one kind of I thought was interesting. And it just talks about the power of sharing ideas. And here we have the colonizers, greeting the people from South America 500 years ago and saying, but without us, you would still be worshiping the sun, which is this idea that North and South America were new worlds, where in fact they were ancient worlds. And the idea that Euro-Christian knowledge and hierarchy and patriarchy was superior. And then the indigenous people responding by saying, well, at least the sun is real. And so it's that situating of thought about the human experience, the human condition, and that relationship in our colonial histories. And I can only talk about the last 500 years in terms of Euro-Christian colonization of different indigenous peoples throughout the world. But other, historically, there has been ongoing colonization and the disruption of indigenous societies. Now, the framework that I use in my work is, again, we mentioned colonization, decolonization, the process of decolonization. And if we look at the recent, Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, 1996, the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, 2015, and the more recent, the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women Inquiry, those are all roadmaps for Canadian society. They're not so much for Indigenous people, it really is for Canadians to understand how we got here today, how we got, to the violence, the misogyny, the anti-Indigenous racism in Canada. And really it is a wake-up call, but also an opportunity to turn our direction toward reconciliation and reconstructing a society that is truthful and based on equity and empathy and justice. And again, many Indigenous artists are focused on the indigenization of their families, their communities, their institutions, as well as mainstream institutions, whether that's health, art, the sciences, or legal systems. And then finally, Indigenous land-based education and land-based reclamation, which again is making that space to live a full life, right? And strengthen that relationship with the natural world, which is what Indigenous people have always had and really is a foundation for the worldview and the expression of art. Now, in terms of indigenization and the work of art, as well as decolonization, here's a painting from 2017 by Harmonia Rosales from the United States, where she takes that idea of patriarchy and Euro-Christianity and the supremacy, and the painting of in the Sistine Chapel, I think it's by Michelangelo, that it was God as a white European, and Adam also represented as a white European. So it's really deconstructing that mythology and that propaganda to revision that in terms of the original founders of the United States were actually African women and their children and their families. And I know in doing this work that Harmonia has said after this was public, she received death threats for even thinking or conceiving that there could be another worldview that is not patriarchal and not colonial, but also tells the truth of North American history and South American history as well. So in terms of that reconstruction, I like to use the metaphor of sort of hand-based art making. And we have Ruth Cuthand, who's an accomplished artist from Saskatchewan. and the work she's done around, the introduction of viruses and bacteria from other parts of the world to Indigenous peoples historically. And she begins her beadwork in the first series called Trade, which was how trading with European settlers brought these new viruses and bacteria into Indigenous communities and devastated them. And so she begins with the smallpox virus in her early series, and now she's keeping up to date in her work. And this is her second piece of work around COVID-19. So again, it's using that sort of a view of Indigenous, beading, and historically it would have been quill work or painting. But in this case, in a contemporary situation, it's beadwork. So in this generation, with Indigenous youth, particularly Indigenous young women, beadwork is very prominent, very popular. Earrings are huge. I think as Vanessa talked about income, right? So for many Indigenous artists, whether it's fine art or not, it is that process of being paid for your art, being paid for your skill, your vision, your aesthetics in promoting beadwork, and a lot of it is sold at art markets online. Another sort of resurgence art around decolonization, but also survival art, and also about political art as well. Ribbon skirt making again has become very popular in the Indigenous community across North America, into the United States as well. And realizing that the skirts actually go back 200 years to the early 1800s when fabrics were brought by settler society, but also the idea of ribbons and the design elements. And here, these ones go back to 1947 in the United States in Oklahoma, 2 young girls wearing ribbon skirts. So again, it is this resurgence, but it's also reclamation of a practice that might have been forgotten or lost or censored or actually erased because of sort of the system today that we have that doesn't value Indigenous points of view, Indigenous philosophy or art. And this photograph is actually evidence that this aesthetic and this worldview or this position was prominent, 70 years ago. And then the second piece here in the middle is the orange color for the orange T-shirt on Indian residential schools. And here we have a fabric artist who has made a ribbon skirt, jingle dress actually, where she's had this applique that tells the whole story of what had happened after those 215 graves were found in Kamloops. And there's the school, and then there's the children. Upon their graves being found, are released, right, and brought back to community. And so, in the powwow circuit, this just would tell that story. And then finally, that sort of integration into more formal ideas of art as, galleries, art galleries, public viewings, and those kind of things. The skirt is actually a canvas. And so it's that transition of, wearing art to actually viewing art in a gallery setting. And that, for Indigenous women who have been oppressed, historically received, violence and misogyny, the skirt itself represents a canvas for a story, for a point of view, for resistance, and for that liberation work. And, and like Vanessa said, it's very hard to get access to art resources, whether that's a studio or, to have your work displayed. So it is using what's at hand, which is the skirt itself, presents the foundation of the canvas for the point of view. as well art in terms of liberation and politics. And on Canada Day last year, there was a sort of the recognition of the orange T-shirts, and there was, a march. And there was an offshoot of people in the march that went to our legislative building. And here you see a photograph of them who, they strategically, got hold of the statue of Queen Victoria, who was actually the Empress of India and the Queen of the United Kingdom, who had sat, in this place of honor in Canada, in Manitoba, for many, decades, and was very, itself a piece of art, if you want to get a point of view in terms of statue making. And the activists pulled it down, and her crown was taken off and her head was thrown into the Red River. So to me, the movement is again about different points of view around decolonization and what needs to happen in decolonization. And for me, when you look at the statue, it looks like it's solid bronze. And when the statue fell over, it was revealed that it was hollow. And I like to use that as a metaphor for colonization, especially Euro-Christian colonization in Canada. It is a hollow message, particularly to Indigenous people, right? That we are part of a kingdom, we're part of an empire, and we're ruled by outsiders. And as well at the back, we have the Louis Riel statue at the Legislative Building. So I thought, now there's a vacancy, we can move Louis to the front of the Legislative Building. So there's all these kind of options. But again, art is the medium in terms of where people focus their particular perspective or point of view. That's it for me. So I put my website in the chat if you want to check it out. I do have some examples of my work there, mostly textile artwork.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Albert McLeod. Much appreciated that beautiful presentation and the time you took to create it for us. Can we hear from Allison Yearwood, and would you kindly introduce yourself and enjoy yourself?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Albert, and thank you, Vanessa. This has been like a great presentation and just so much energy and life and things and food to think about. Yeah, it is a beautiful presentation. And I'd like to thank Maggie and yeah, just everyone who's put their intention and has offered something really special today, because I think we all can collectively try to need some good energy, because there's been a lot coming at us in the last 22 months. Yes, someone had to break it down as it like, you're raising a toddler, 22 months. So for 22 months, we've been going through something. Okay, so I'm Allison Yearwood. I am I guess I have to start saying the newish, because it's starting to be like, I'm not exactly new and shiny anymore, but I'm the newish executive director for Plugin ICA, which is an Institute for Contemporary Art. That's what the ICA stands for. I am also the board chair for Ace Art Inc., and I'm a board member at large for the Spiderweb show. And I'm also on the equity committee for CAMDO. Yeah, and then I try to fit in some sleep sometimes. I think what I'm gonna try to do now that we've had the kind of like the juice and the sparking from Vanessa and the contextualizing from Albert, I think what I can do is come in as maybe a little bit of a conduit and as the representative of like the organization or the institution in the public sphere. It's kind of like, how am I responding to decolonization, and how am I responding to making sure that I am unlearning and unteaching the kind of harmful frameworks that we know white supremacy has offered us, but how can I realistically and safely offer new ways of doing this work? And I think, knock on glass. I'm not a glass table. I think I have been doing that, and I'm going to tie in a little bit of the connective tissue that both of my colleagues have kind of brought to the conversation. And Albert was talking about the orange t-shirts, and that was something that I personally wanted to really do, something that wasn't just self-serving for the organization or wasn't tokenistic to being like, oh, we're virtue signaling and we're doing the right thing, but being really hollow. The team and I don't do this by myself. I have other individuals who work at Plugin and who support and also advocate for the work. So I should always make sure that I'm acknowledging the effort of the people I work with. But yeah, we wanted to do something that wasn't going to just be base. We wanted something that was going to be non-Indigenous people actually doing something that was critical and in service, and that could be of benefit to people that harm has been inflicted on. And just that's the end of it. We don't need to kind of self-soothe. We don't need to make sure that we feel okay with it. We just need to make sure that we're getting on with it. And so we looked at the model of the orange t-shirt, and fortunately, because I have worked so deeply with Indigenous artists and art practitioners, and as you can see from my background, this is Banff. I was the former Indigenous arts program manager there. So I've been really fortunate to be able to, as a stolen person on stolen land, I've been able to walk in friendship, in learning, and now that I have influence, I'm putting that influence into action. And so what I wanted to do was do something that was economic. So I said, okay, orange t-shirt. Well, we can't make all the money, so we have to figure out to whom we would give. So we wanted to give to an Indigenous organization that was specifically geared towards reconciliation work and residential school survivors. So we chose WASE, and I worked with the artists. Luckily, Dana Danger, Kite, and icasc are all Indigenous artists. And what we did was, I just said, this is what I need it to do. I need it to be an orange t-shirt, and I need to sell it for money. I need your offering to be paid at an equitable stance. So I'll make less profit, but I'll make sure you're paid something that is representational to your effort and your time, but making sure that we have enough money that we can also give back to the organization at large that we want to support. And I don't know, but we're transparent with each other. We just always kept the conversation as clear and as calm. The t-shirt was beautifully designed. There was no kind of heralding to kind of the overarching message that most orange t-shirts had. We wanted our orange t-shirts to kind of be able to be worn all of the time, and for it to be more in your day-to-day. We didn't want it just to be on the one day when everyone wears it. We wanted it to really be, this is something that you can be thinking of every day. This is something that can be part of your everyday living. It should be part of your everyday living. And I'll be really frank, we ended up doing 4 runs of the t-shirt due to just sheer popularity in selling the t-shirt. We were able to pay each of the artists an equitable and fair wage for the effort and labor they put into the t-shirt. And I'm very proud to say we were also able to give a donation of $600 to folks at WASE House. Also, because there was so much of lack of clarity, at least to me as a new leader, on the employment standards on Truth and Reconciliation Day. And I'll just say this, I just went, well, if the province can't give me the direction I need, I will take the direction I think I should have. And if this is a holiday, I'm treating it as such. And we had 2 exhibitions going on. So I would have closed the gallery to observe it like a holiday, but we had 2 amazing exhibitions, When Veins Meet Like Rivers and Tailings Pool by Thema Igaris. And I was just like, no, if everyone has a day to slow down and think and be in reflection and to actually acknowledge what are you doing to change what has happened or what is happening, then I wanted those 2 exhibitions to be available so people could sit in the awesomeness of what the storytelling of the people that we live on the land of. And I'm just really happy that that was something that I think I've made the footprint of for my organization and our team. I think we're working together and thinking about ways. I'm working with another artist, Leonard Suryajaya. He is challenging me on how an exhibition space can also be a space for economic sovereignty for an artist. I am leaning in. I think it's my responsibility to lean in. I think it's my responsibility to be challenged by artists. I think when artists ask me, why must there be so much environmental detritus, or why do we support organizations like shipping companies that put no investment back into the art industry? Why are we literally back funding them? I'm happy that artists are challenging me because therefore they challenge the framework of the organization and they affect the largest amount of change. And so even though Plugin has moved from being where its roots began, an artist-run center, it is actually now an artist-led center because it's the way that the plurality of how the artists and curators need to come in that is actually affecting the most change. I guess that's because I'm leading it and I'm listening and leaning in. I do have to give myself a critique, which is I'm very slow. Even though I'm very action oriented and very big thinker, abstract thinker, I'm not following the frameworks of putting my programming out 2 years in advance. To me, that seems weird. And I say that just because how am I being responsive to the community that I serve if I'm programming so far ahead of them that they have no chance to speak to me? I have to be looser, so I have to be slower. It's terrifying for most. I do agree. It means that things don't look the same. And luckily enough, I have enough self-confidence to kind of get out there and be brave. I will say this though, in my slower working model, I have more comments from artists saying, I have never felt more safe. I have never felt more heard. This has been one of the most special experiences I've had. And that to me is really the key. And when people come in, and hopefully people will be able to come in again. Yeah. And when people come in, I want them to know that they can come in that the way that they want to come in. I've been working in this downtime. I've been working with my team to better address accessibility issues that Plugin has historically had. So making our more safe and comforting and lovely for folks who maybe haven't been able to come in and feel safe and lovely and heard. We're doing a lot of unlearning. That's a lot of work and it takes a lot of emotional labor. So it's also back building and creating that backbone of self-supports for ourselves, learning how to manage ourselves, learning how to take conflict on and not have to be so reactionary. These things take time. And I know that people like to see shows and exhibitions and glitzy things, but I also think it's more important that the organization that has the influence and creates the spaces and creates the publications and creates the work, that the actual framework and the people inside it are actually safe people who can do that work effectively. So I've been taking great pains. So maybe that's why people are like, what is Plugin doing? It's, well, Plugin's getting safe. That's what Plugin's doing. So if people needed to hear that, let me say that. And you'll be seeing a lot more of us, trust and believe. Can everyone hear me? I feel like I just got really muffled. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Sorry, the advice was to put headphones on, so I did. And now it's just like, I feel like Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation, you know, so it's just a lot. Okay. Thank you. Oh, thank you for the feedback. That's really important in Zoom land, like that we can actually have some kind of reciprocal relationship. But I want to be really mindful because I feel like this audience is really engaged and really feeling this and really coming through on it. And I just wanted to give opportunity and space for questions and conversation. So I'm going to stop right there and just allow the audience to kind of love bomb us with some questions and comments and just the energy that we need so we can keep this lovely last day of this symposium going.
Great. Thank you, Allison. A round of applause. Great people. Yeah, Janet Jackson, that record just made 40 years. Please post any questions in the chat. I have a question for you. This slowing down, this being able to work in response, have you staggered how that works, or are you doing some of your programming in advance and then leaving space where you can be more responsive? Or like, how have you managed, like, again, another liminal space where you've got something that's set up and it's a structure that needs a momentum, yet we're trying to be present and work in real time? How have you?
Yeah. So I'm doing it. That's an active activity. I'm not going to say I'm being successful. I'm just going to say I'm actively doing that. So really, I'm looking at the historic programs that Plugin has had, and I'm re-looking at them. I'm looking at who has not been allowed to speak, who has been left out. Why have they been left out? So some of it has to be like, there has to be like a little bit of Carmen Sandiegoing these questions, but you're absolutely right. As we find out what's going on, you can't just leave space, like you can't just leave resources to rot, and you can't just leave space to go bare. And so I think the greatest analogy right now I have is I'm moving aside. So I'm letting other curators kind of come into the space. I'm letting other people come in, because while I have to be in the background kind of figuring out how are we doing this, I want other people who are like, I've never been able to have the traditional white cube. Well, come in here and use it as a project space right now. Like this resource shouldn't go underutilized just because we're doing something else. If there's someone who can actually, work with it and use it and be proactive, I think that's really important. Something that I'm also evaluating. Hello, sorry.
I'm gonna thank you for that. And we've just got a couple of moments left, and I wanted to ask something similar to Albert. There was a question in the chat, and if Albert finishes and we've still got a moment, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Allison.
What's it say?
This is the question.
What's the question?
I'm about to say it. Are you ready? Either how have you been able to identify when you're feeling safe, or how have you seen people say, like, how do you know when somebody's safe, that you've created a safe space? Albert, I'm wondering if you have an example of that, and then certainly Allison afterwards.
Well, I think for Indigenous people, we create our own safe spaces through ceremony, through powwows, through our social events. And many times it's only Indigenous people attending because some people don't feel comfortable or being there. And so it is, the social structure of our communities itself, right, that is side by side with Canadian society. And many times they don't intersect. Right, so we have, very land-based, like I said, the powwow circuit that extends into the United States, a lot of cross-border travel. It is about community, family, about culture, about dancing, singing, and the regalia is an expression of art.
And Albert, but what about when you're outside of Indigenous spaces? Like, we all can appreciate when we're inside of our communities of origin or culture. How have you experienced, or where have you experienced a sense of coming in as an Indigenous person or with other Indigenous artists to a space where you felt like, okay, I'm here, I'm good?
Yeah, with Creative Manitoba, which has an Indigenous component to it, and has engaged myself in that work of, as I mentioned, the sort of decolonization and reconciliation and reconstruction perspective, right? So there are sort of dedicated, and it is facilitated by an Indigenous person who is an artist. So we have commonalities, right? Where I actually don't do all the explaining of why we think in a certain way. So there are places that are non-Indigenous but have a component or a stream.
Thank you so much, Albert. Allison, we've got just a few breaths left. Can you take us out on, if you've heard, like, have artists been saying to you, I feel better, I feel safer here, I feel maybe not even safe, but just like welcome and ready to roll?
Yeah, absolutely they have. My last exhibition and my current exhibition that I'm bringing in, both of like Jana, Asceniac Kite, you'll hear it in the podcast, shameless self-plug, that they have felt heard. And I think the quickest way that I can show that example is when they've asked for something, I didn't immediately push them aside, or I didn't immediately have the excuse of, I don't have the money for it. If there were barriers, I was transparent about the barriers, but I got the closest to what they wanted and was really like showing my hands the whole time. And I think by doing that and by being really fair and transparent with them and being immediate, like it wasn't like they'd ask for something and 3 weeks later, oh yeah, blah. No, it was like within the hour of something being requested, they could see the change. And I think that was just one of the ways just to show, yeah, we can make this happen. Like you are part of this. We are part of what we're doing here. And I think for them to see that an organization could hear them, listen to them, and not challenge them automatically, I think that was a refreshing, I mean, I know, because that's what they've told me, it was a refreshing change.
Allison, I want to thank you for bringing up the complexity of both moving slowly, moving at the speed of trust, but also being lightning quick, responsive, and transparent, and really being able to hold those two different time frames, and also both of those working in opposite ways to what standard dominant culture does. One is like, oh, I'll get back to you when I feel like it, and the other one is hurry up and wait. We're waiting for you. Hurry up and wait. So I just want to like raise my hands to you and say, that's a way to roll. And Albert, I want to thank you for weaving in really just the abidingness of what culture does and how culture saves lives, and what it is when we're able to be holding our culture at a time when it's so necessary, and what it means for Indigenous people to have you doing this work, and what it means for non-Indigenous people to have you doing this work and to be in your company and to see the beautiful things that you're both making space for, the transformational work you're making space for. I want to say thank you very much to Judith and her team and the International Center of Arts for Social Change, and thank all of you for giving us your precious breaths for this last hour. And I pass it over to the production team here, and we thank you so wholeheartedly for being with us today.